In 1905, Albert Einstein realized something genuinely, well, terrifying about the universe.
Oh, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, he was looking at this very specific behavior of light, and the data sitting right in front of him was actively breaking the known laws of physics.
Right, breaking them completely.
Because light, which literally the entire scientific establishment knew for a fact was a continuous wave, was suddenly behaving like a stream of physical, indivisible bullets.
It was acting as a wave and a particle at the exact same time, which is, impossible.
Totally impossible. To the human mind, that is a total paradox.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like saying an object is simultaneously a perfect sphere and a perfect cube.
Yeah, it just doesn't compute.
Right. But today, we are exploring a source text that takes that exact mathematical impossibility from quantum mechanics, and it uses it as a lens to decode an ancient divine paradox.
It's a fascinating approach.
It really is. We are going to take the rigorous mathematical laws of quantum physics and map them directly onto the identity of Jesus Christ.
So we are looking at this deeply compelling synthesis. It's from a text called Analyses Biblico-Scientificas by Ozair de Silva Mota.
And the premise here is just so bold.
Right. The premise is essentially to place the physical universe and the theological universe side by side.
Like a split screen.
Exactly, like a split screen. On one side, you have these intricate, highly precise quantum equations, Planck's constant, the speed of light, the exact energy of a single photon.
All the hard math.
All the hard math. And then on the other side, you have ancient biblical scrolls detailing this concept called the Hypostatic Union.
So the goal is to see how the scientific rigor of physics directly mirrors the theological precision of those ancient texts.
Yeah, that's the mission for this deep dive.
Which is huge. And, to really grasp the theological paradox, this idea of Christ being fully God and fully man simultaneously, we really have to first deeply understand the scientific one.
We do. We need to go back a bit.
Yeah, back to the late 19th century, which was a time when the scientific community was suffering from, frankly, a massive case of hubris.
Hubris is, it's the perfect word for it.
They're so confident.
Oh, by the late 1800s, classical physics felt completely triumphant. The mechanics of the universe basically seemed solved to them.
Right, because Isaac Newton had handled gravity and motion.
Exactly. And James Clerk Maxwell had seemingly handled light and electromagnetism.
With those brilliant equations of his.
Yeah, through Maxwell's equations, the scientific consensus was just absolute. Light was a continuous transverse electromagnetic wave. End of story.
And it wasn't just like a philosophical preference for waves. It was backed by flawless, observable data.
The data was rock solid.
Right, like if you shine a light through a narrow slit, it doesn't just hit the wall behind it in a straight, hard line.
Yeah.
Like a bullet would.
Right, it spreads out, it diffracts.
Exactly. And if you use two slits, the light waves actually overlap. Where the crest of one wave meets the trough of another wave, they cancel each other out.
Leaving those dark bands on the wall.
Leaving dark bands, yeah. And where they meet crest to crest, they amplify, leaving bright bands.
Which creates an interference pattern.
And you can only get interference patterns if light is a wave.
Exactly. You can't get that with particles. So it was deterministic. It was mathematically sound. The case was completely closed.
Closed right up until 1886.
Yeah, the universe has a habit of throwing curveballs just when we think we have the rule book completely finalized.
Always.
Yeah.
So what happened in 1886?
Well, a German physicist named Heinrich Hertz was running some experiments. He was working with electromagnetic waves and sparks, and he observed this weird anomaly.
Something that didn't fit the wave theory.
Right. It's a phenomenon we now call the photoelectric effect. So to visualize this for you listening, picture a completely flat, highly polished metal plate sitting in a laboratory.
Okay, got it.
Hertz noticed that when you shine certain types of light onto that metal surface, something happens down at the microscopic level.
The atoms react.
Yeah, the atoms in the metal absorb the energy from the light, and as a direct consequence of that, they eject electrons.
Wait, they physically spit them out?
Literally spit out these negatively charged particles, which creates an electric current.
Okay, let's pause and look at the mechanics of that, because on the surface, a wave washing over a beach and knocking some pebbles loose doesn't sound like a massive crisis for physics.
It sounds totally normal, right?
Right. If light is a continuous wave carrying energy, it washes over the metal, the energy transfers into the electrons, and eventually it just pops them out. So why did this specific observation cause a 2-decade panic in the physics community?
Because the actual behavior of those ejected electrons completely violated the math of wave theory.
How so?
Well, think about the wave as a continuous flow of energy. like water from a hose filling up a bucket.
Yeah.
The bucket represents the energy an electron needs to escape the metal plate. Wave theory dictated that if you increase the intensity, the brightness of the light, you are essentially turning up the water pressure on the hose.
So a brighter light should knock off more electrons.
Right, or give them a lot more kinetic energy. Alternatively, if you have a very dim light, like a low-pressure trickle from the hose, you just have to wait longer.
Because it takes longer to fill the bucket.
Exactly. The continuous wave energy would slowly build up inside the metal until the electron's bucket was finally full, and then pop, it would jump out.
That makes perfect intuitive sense. You shine a dim light, you wait a few minutes, the energy accumulates, and then you get an electron.
But that is the exact opposite of what actually happened in the laboratory.
Really?
Yeah, the brightness of the light didn't matter at all in the way classical physics predicted.
Wait, brightness didn't matter.
Not at all. If physicists took a brutally intense, blindingly bright red light, a wave with a long wavelength and low frequency, and they shone it on the metal, nothing happened.
Not a single electron.
Nothing. They could leave that intense red light shining for a month and the bucket would never fill.
No.
Not a single electron would ever budge. But, however, the instant they shone very dim, barely visible blue light, a wave with a shorter wavelength and higher frequency, electrons ejected instantaneously.
Instantaneously. Zero buildup time.
Zero buildup time. The continuous wave theory collapsed on the spot.
Okay, so if the bucket analogy fails, then light literally can't be acting like a continuous flow of water.
Right.
And this is where the source text brings in that massive breakthrough of 1905. Einstein realizes that in this specific metal and light interaction, the wave theory has to be, well, temporarily abandoned to explain the reality of the data sitting on the desk.
Yes. And Einstein actually built upon a pretty radical idea proposed earlier by Max Planck.
The quanta idea.
Exactly. Planck had suggested, mostly as a mathematical trick to solve a totally different problem involving heat, that energy might not actually be a continuous stream.
It's fragmented.
Yes. He proposed that energy is fundamentally fragmented. It exists in tiny, discrete, indivisible packets, which he called quanta.
So if we translate that back to our water analogy, it's like discovering that a stream of water isn't a continuous fluid at all.
No, it's not.
It's actually made up of trillions of tiny, distinct, indivisible, hard marbles.
Exactly. And Einstein took Planck's mathematical trick and basically declared it physical reality.
He said, this is actually how it works.
Right. He postulated that light, when interacting with the electrons in the metal, is not a wave. It is a stream of discrete, indivisible particles, which we now call photons.
So instead of a wave washing over the beach, you have to picture like a cosmic game of billiards.
Yes, perfect analogy. These photons travel through space and they violently collide with the electrons.
And this explains the red light versus blue light mystery. Because the energy of these photon billiard balls isn't determined by how many of them there are, which would be the brightness.
Right, brightness is just the number of photons.
So the energy is determined by their frequency, their color.
Exactly. A red photon simply does not carry enough individual energy to knock an electron free.
It's too weak.
Right, so it doesn't matter if you fire a trillion of them at the metal, which is what a very bright red light is. They will all just bounce off.
Because they individually lack the punch.
Yes. But a single blue photon carries a higher frequency, meaning it's a higher packet of energy.
So when that single blue photon hits the electron, it transfers its exact specific amount of energy in one violent collision.
Causing an instantaneous quantum leap, the electron is knocked right out of the plate.
Okay, wait, I have a question though. With the photoelectric effect providing this hard, undeniable proof that light acts like a billiard ball knocking an electron out, why didn't Einstein just say Maxwell was entirely wrong?
That's a great question.
Like, why keep the wave theory at all if the particle theory perfectly explains the ejection of electrons? Let's just say light is a particle and move on.
Right. Because doing that would mean completely ignoring the diffraction and interference patterns we talked about earlier.
Oh, right, the overlapping crests and troughs.
Yeah, you can't create alternating bands of light and dark interference with the stream of billiard balls.
Yeah, if you fire bullets through two slits, you just get two clusters of bullet holes on the wall behind it. You don't get a complex interference pattern.
Exactly. The empirical data for the wave theory was just as undeniable as the empirical data for the particle theory. Einstein didn't disprove Maxwell. He proved that Maxwell's explanation was incomplete.
The paradigm shift here is just seismic. The universe essentially forced the scientific community to accept that light is not either a wave or a particle.
Right.
Depending on the apparatus used to observe it, depending on the specific interaction, light is fundamentally both.
Both at once.
And to our macroscopic, everyday human brains, a continuous spreading wave and a discrete solid particle are mutually exclusive categories. I mean, they cancel each other out logically.
Right.
But reality doesn't conform to our limited logic.
No, it doesn't. And what's really fascinating here is that this specific discovery, the explanation of the photoelectric effect and the mathematical proof of the photon, is what actually won Einstein his Nobel Prize in physics in 1922.
Wait, really? Not relativity.
Not relativity. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences was still pretty hesitant about the theory of relativity back then, but the empirical proof of the photon was undeniable. He handed humanity the key to the intimate structure of light.
And it's worth pointing out to everyone listening that this paradox is the literal foundation of modern civilization.
Oh, absolutely.
Like when a solar panel converts sunlight directly into electricity, that is the photoelectric effect happening in real time.
The photons are knocking electrons loose in the silicon?
Yes. Or when automatic doors slide open as you walk up to them, or when you capture an image on your smartphone's digital camera, you are relying entirely on the fact that light behaves as a physical particle colliding with matter.
The invisible, paradoxical nature of light literally runs our world.
It really does. But Ozair da Silva Mota's text insists that we don't just marvel at this as a neat piece of historical trivia.
No, we have to go deeper.
Right. To appreciate the analogy he built, we have to examine the severe, uncompromising rigor of the mathematics governing this duality. It is an exact, calculable science.
So let's look at the math of the invisible. The energy of a photon isn't random. It is intrinsically tied to its vibrational identity.
And the text provides the specific equation for this, right?
Yes. E equals h times nu. Or, if you want to express it with different variables, E equals h times c divided by lambda.
Okay, let's break those variables down simply so we can see the machinery at work here.
Sure. So the E stands for the energy of a single photon.
Got it.
And to find that energy, you take h, which represents Planck's constant. You multiply that constant by c, which is the speed of light.
And then,
Finally, you divide that result by lambda, which is the specific wavelength of the light you are observing.
so we actually have a highly specific, practical example from the source text to demonstrate this precision, and I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, it really grounds the math.
Imagine you're standing on a quiet street at night, right? You're standing under the glow of a vibrant yellow sodium street lamp.
Very specific color.
Yes, that distinct yellow light has a known, measurable wavelength. It is exactly, well, approximately 5780 angstroms.
And just for context, an angstrom is a unit of length used to measure things at the atomic scale.
It's tiny.
Yeah, 1 angstrom is 1/10,000,000th of a meter. So we are dealing with a wavelength that is incomprehensibly small to the human eye, but it's perfectly measurable by physics.
So we take that specific wavelength, the 5780 angstroms, and we plug it into the fundamental constants of the universe to find the exact energy of a single particle of that yellow light.
Right. The calculation requires Planck's constant, which is just an infinitesimally small number. It's 6 times 10 to the negative 34th.
Okay.
You multiply that by the speed of light, which is roughly 299 million meters per second. Then you divide by that yellow wavelength.
And the text gives us the exact, indisputable mathematical result. The energy of one single photon of that yellow light is 3.4388 times 10 to the negative 19th joules.
And a joule is roughly the amount of energy required to lift a small apple about 1 meter in the air.
So this number is incredibly small.
Oh, 10 to the negative 19th joules is a decimal point followed by 18 zeros, and then 34388. It is a measurement so small it practically borders on the metaphysical.
But it's real.
It is the quantum. It is the smallest possible indivisible portion of action in the universe. This math proves that the mysterious, paradoxical world of wave-particle duality doesn't operate on chaos.
Right.
It is governed by strict, severe, perfectly calculable laws.
Okay, but I have to throw a massive flag on the play here.
Okay, go ahead.
Because, look, we just walked through exact decimal point precision for a subatomic particle. We used universal constants. We used undeniable mathematical formulas.
We did.
But the whole premise of this deep dive is that the author is pivoting from this physical realm into the theological realm. Are we really supposed to believe that ancient theology, a collection of scrolls written by Bronze and Iron Age cultures, operates on a framework that actually matches the rigor of E equals H times nu. I mean, comparing a physics equation to a 2,000-year-old religious narrative seems like a massive category error.
It does seem like that on the surface, but that tension is completely deliberate.
Deliberate.
Yes. The author's argument is that just as the scientific community had to surrender to the empirical evidence of wave-particle duality, even when it totally defied their macroscopic logic,
Like,
we're being asked to look at the textual historical evidence of the dual nature of Christ with that exact same objective lens.
okay, so the focal point of this analysis is Jesus Christ, who is referred to in the Gospel of John as the Word, the Logos, and, crucially for this specific analogy, the true light.
Yes, the true light. Which brings us to the central theological paradox here, the hypostatic union.
That's a heavy theological term.
It is. This is the orthodox doctrine established in the early centuries of the Church. It states that from the moment of the Incarnation, Jesus Christ is simultaneously the eternal, omniscient, omnipotent creator of the universe and a limited, fragile, mortal human being.
The source text literally calls this concept a round square.
A perfect description.
Right. To human logic, it is the mixing of utterly incompatible categories. I mean, how can a being who gets hungry, who needs sleep, who has a cellular structure that ages, and who is subject to physical death, simultaneously be the omnipresent, uncreated God?
It sounds like an absurdity, just like wave-particle duality.
Exactly.
But the parallel to physics is direct and structural. If we connect this to the bigger picture, just as light is not part wave and part particle mixed into some kind of soup.
Right, it's not a blend.
No, it is fully wave and fully particle depending on the interaction. Christ is not viewed as a demigod.
Like Hercules or something.
Right, he is not 50% God and 50% man. The theological framework demands he is fully God and fully man.
And when you look at the texts, when humanity interacted with Jesus during his life, his human wave nature, the macroscopic, obvious nature, was undeniable.
Very obvious.
He experienced physical exhaustion. He slept through a storm on a boat because he was tired. He bled. And perhaps most tellingly, the religious and political leaders of his day conspired to arrest and execute him.
Right.
And you just do not plot to assassinate someone if you solely perceive them as the terrifying, omnipotent God of the cosmos.
You'd run the other way.
Exactly. His humanity was obvious. But his divine particle nature manifested in very specific, targeted interactions.
And that is where the challenge lies, right? Proving the divinity side of the equation.
Yes.
Because if the math formula proves the existence of the photon, what is the data set that proves the divinity of Christ? The source text argues that the biblical text, when analyzed deductively, provides a set of historical and textual clues that force a single logical conclusion.
And the author gives a fantastic, really grounded analogy for how this deductive reasoning actually works.
I love this analogy.
Yeah, so imagine I have a hidden animal inside a closed cardboard box. You have to identify it based on a series of empirical data points that I give you.
Okay, I'm playing along.
Clue number 1. The animal has 4 legs. Now, logically, that narrows the field, but it's not conclusive. I mean, it could be a mouse, a lizard, or an elephant.
The field is still wide open.
Right. Clue number 2, it is a common house pet.
Okay, now we've excluded the elephant and the lizard.
Exactly. We are mostly looking at dogs, cats, or maybe a rabbit.
Okay.
Clue number 3. Humans have historically used this specific animal to guard their homes and properties.
All right, the statistical probability shifts heavily here.
It really does. And finally, clue number 4. The vocalization it makes is called a bark.
Well, the conclusion is inexorable. It is undeniably a dog.
Right. No rational person analyzing the totality of those 4 data points combined would conclude that you have a rabbit in the box. The combined data literally forces the specific conclusion.
And the author applies this exact methodical, deductive approach to the ancient texts to prove the divinity of Jesus.
This is so interesting because it's specifically countering a very modern narrative, right?
Yeah, often from secular critics or alternative historical theories, claiming that the divinity of Jesus was just a later invention.
Right, like some argue it was a pagan concept layered onto a simple Jewish rabbi decades later.
Or something that was just voted on by politicians at councils like Nicaea hundreds of years later.
But the text argues, no, let's look at the raw data of the primary sources. Let's look at the 4 major clues right there in the text.
So we treat these 4 biblical proofs as rigorous data points demanding an explanation. The first data point is found in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2.
And this one centers on the authority to forgive sins.
Yes. And we have to dive into the first century cultural context to really understand why this is a massive data point.
It's the story of the paralyzed man, right?
Exactly. The text recounts this incredible scene. Jesus is teaching inside a house in Capernaum, and it is absolutely packed with people.
Including hostile religious scholars who are watching his every move.
Right. It's so crowded that no one else can get in the door. So 4 friends carry this paralyzed man up the outside stairs. They literally tear a hole through the mud and clay roof, and they lower the man down on a mat right in front of Jesus.
Which is just a wild scene to imagine. The dust is settling. Everyone in the room is staring, completely expecting a physical medical miracle.
But the very first thing Jesus says to the man isn't, "Be healed."
No.
He says, "Son, your sins are forgiven."
And the underlying logic of that statement is what triggered an immediate crisis in the room.
Total crisis.
The religious scholars instantly recognized it as a scandal. And the source text uses a really good financial analogy to explain why they were so upset.
Let's hear it.
Let's say you owe a bank $100,000.
Okay.
A random person on the street cannot walk up to you and say, "Hey, I declare your mortgage forgiven." That stranger has absolutely no jurisdiction over the debt.
Because the debt is strictly between me and the bank.
Exactly. The bank is the only entity with the authority to cancel it.
Right. And in the theological framework of first century Judaism, humans might offend or physically hurt each other. But all sin, at its core, is a rebellion against the ultimate lawgiver.
It is a debt owed to the Creator.
So when a carpenter from Nazareth looks at a paralyzed man and declares his sins forgiven on his own personal authority, he is doing one of 2 things.
What are they?
He is either uttering a massive delusional blasphemy, or he is claiming intrinsic divine authority.
He's claiming to be the bank.
Exactly. He's claiming to be the bank. And to validate that invisible metaphysical claim of authority, he performs the visible physical healing immediately after.
Right. He tells the man to pick up his mat and walk, and the man just does it.
The physical miracle is the empirical proof of the invisible reality. The data point is clear. He operates with the jurisdictional authority of the Creator.
Which flows directly into the second data point, the issue of glory and worship.
Yes, this is a big one.
The author anchors this in a very specific baseline from the ancient text of Isaiah chapter 42, verse 8. In the Hebrew Bible, the Creator is absolute and uncompromising on one specific point.
He shares his glory with no one.
Right. The worship of creatures, angels, or idols is strictly, unequivocally forbidden. Worship is an action reserved exclusively for the divine.
Yet, when we analyze the data across the Gospels, Jesus constantly and repeatedly accepts worship.
It happens all the time.
The text lists the occurrences. The Magi from the east fall down and worship him as a toddler. A man suffering from leprosy approaches and worships him. The disciples in a boat, terrified after he calms a massive storm with just a word, they fall down and worship him.
And the women at the empty tomb grab his feet and worship him.
Furthermore, the book of Hebrews commands all the angels of God to worship him.
The analytical logic here is stark. Let's assume for a moment the secular argument is true, right? That Jesus is merely an extraordinary human prophet or a highly elevated moral teacher. Accepting this worship is an act of supreme arrogance and a direct usurpation of God's exclusive glory.
It would be, yeah.
Because whenever a good prophet or an angel in the biblical texts is mistakenly worshipped by a human, they panic. They literally immediately stop the person, saying, "Stand up, I am just a fellow servant."
They refuse it instantly.
But Jesus never stops them. He accepts the worship as his rightful due. If he isn't God, the entire moral framework of his teachings completely collapses. He wouldn't be a good teacher, he would be a megalomaniac.
That leads directly to the third data point, intrinsic miraculous authority.
Now, it's important to acknowledge that other figures in the biblical narrative performed incredible miracles.
Sure, Moses parted the sea, Elijah called down fire, the apostles healed the sick.
But there is a distinct grammatical and functional difference in how they operated compared to how Jesus operated.
Right, the prophets and apostles operated strictly as conduits or proxies. When Peter heals someone, he explicitly says, "In the name of Jesus Christ, walk."
When Moses acts, he is following a direct, explicit command from God. They are instruments relying on an external power source.
But Jesus operates on his own intrinsic authority. The text highlights Matthew 8, where a leper asks if Jesus is willing to heal him.
And what does Jesus do?
He doesn't look up and pray to the heavens for the power to act. He doesn't invoke a higher authority. He simply states, "I will be clean."
The grammar of his miracles, "I command you, I will it," is literally the grammar of the divine speaking reality into existence.
It is the voice of the architect, not the builder.
And finally, we arrive at the fourth clue, the ultimate data point that completes the equation, the resurrection.
The author refers to this as the sign of Jonah. Jesus didn't just casually predict that he would face political execution and then come back to life.
No, he staked his entire identity and authority on that specific, verifiable event.
And the historical evidence for this variable goes far beyond just an empty tomb. The text points to the profound psychological and sociological transformation of the disciples.
This is a huge point.
You have a group of men who, during the crucifixion, were absolutely terrified. They fled, they denied knowing him, they locked themselves in a room fearing they would be executed next.
Right.
Yet, within a matter of weeks, these same terrified men are standing in the public squares of Jerusalem, directly confronting the very authorities who killed Jesus.
And they willingly faced beatings, imprisonment, and eventually brutal martyrdoms, all based on the absolute certainty that they had interacted with him after he died.
You might die for a metaphor or a political ideology you hope is true.
People do that.
Right. But you do not subject yourself to torture and death for a physical event, a resurrection, that you know for a fact you fabricated.
Exactly. The historical data point is that they believe they had empirical proof of his victory over death.
So when you synthesize all of this, when you take the authority to forgive cosmic debts, the acceptance of exclusive divine worship, the intrinsic power to manipulate nature with a word, and the historical reality of the resurrection, the logical deduction is closed.
You can't just categorize him as a good teacher. That option isn't supported by the variable.
You treat these textual verses exactly like the variables in Planck's equation.
You combine them, and they yield an undeniable, precise result.
The result articulated in the letter to the Colossians, chapter 2, verse 9, "For in him all the fullness of deity dwells in bodily form."
The variables balance perfectly. The hidden animal in the box is a dog. The man on the cross is God.
It is a stunning logical architecture. So we have established what the duality is, the wave and the particle in physics, the humanity and the divinity in theology.
And we have established how it is proven, through empirical physical data and rigorous textual deduction.
But any curious mind must inevitably arrive at the most profound question of all.
The why.
Exactly. Why did it have to happen this way?
I mean, why did the creator of the cosmos, the entity responsible for the speed of light and the mass of galaxies, subject himself to the extreme fragility of human biology?
Why experience the limitation of a nervous system, the exhaustion of a human body, and the humiliation of execution?
The text transitions us from the mechanics of the Incarnation to its ultimate purpose.
And to explore this why, the author pulls a thread from one of the oldest, most haunting texts in ancient literature, the Book of Job.
Wow.
Yeah, Job is a man who has experienced total devastation. He has lost his children, his wealth, and his health. He is sitting in the ashes of his ruined life, covered in physical agony, and he screams this profound accusation up at the heavens in Job 10.4.
Do you have eyes of flesh? Do you see as mortals see?
This raises an incredibly devastating philosophical question regarding the nature of the divine. Classical theology dictates that God is omniscient.
Meaning he possesses absolute, perfect knowledge of all things past, present, and future.
But Job is challenging that definition. This raises an important question. Does absolute objective knowledge equal lived subjective experience?
Let's really explore that difference because it is crucial. Imagine a highly advanced supercomputer. You program this computer with every single medical text ever written about a broken femur. The computer knows the exact tensile strength required to snap the bone.
It has all the data.
All of it. It can map the precise neurological pathways, the pain signals travel to reach the brain. It knows the chemical composition of the marrow and the exact cellular process of healing.
So it possesses absolute perfect knowledge of the fracture.
Yes, but the computer does not know what it actually feels like to have a broken leg.
Job is essentially accusing God of being that supercomputer. He is saying, "You observed my suffering from a dimension of infinite perfection and invulnerability. You know the mechanics of my pain, but you don't know what it's like to be trapped inside this fragile, decaying flesh."
It is the ultimate human plea for empathy and validation.
And the author argues that the Incarnation, the Hypostatic Union, is the definitive, universe-altering answer to Job's cry.
By taking on the corpuscular nature of humanity, by becoming the particle, God stepped out of the realm of pure observation and into the lived experience.
The text quotes the book of Hebrews, which describes Jesus as a sympathetic high priest.
Because he experienced the wave-particle duality. He didn't just know about human pain by divine decree or distant observation. He felt it in his own nervous system.
He felt the emotional sting of a close friend's betrayal. He felt the sheer exhaustion of a long journey on foot.
He felt the physical agony of the Roman whip and the terrifying psychological despair of feeling abandoned.
So when humanity approaches the divine with its suffering, the divine can honestly reply, I know, I was there, I felt it.
It transforms the entire concept of the divine from a distant, untouchable architect into an intimate participant in the suffering of his own creation.
But empathy, as beautiful as it is only half of the why.
Right. So what does this all mean for the concept of salvation? The other half is purely functional.
It is what the author calls the engineering of reconciliation.
So if empathy is the emotional reason, we must understand the mechanical reason.
The mechanics of salvation, as outlined in texts like 2 Corinthians and 1 Timothy, require a bridge to span an infinite chasm. You have an infinitely holy, perfect creator on one side, and a broken, finite humanity that has incurred an infinite debt on the other.
It's like if you are negotiating a peace treaty between two warring nations. The mediator standing in the middle has to be trusted by and legitimately represent both sides.
Right.
You can't have a mediator who only belongs to one nation.
Because the other side will completely reject the terms, right?
Exactly. This is why the hypostatic union, this impossible round square paradox, was an absolute engineering requirement.
Let's look at the alternatives. If Jesus were only a human being, even a perfect, flawless human being, his sacrifice on the cross would only possess the value of one finite human life.
It would lack the infinite purity, the infinite value, and the ultimate authority required to satisfy the absolute justice of the cosmos and cover the debt of humanity across all the time.
A finite payment simply cannot clear an infinite debt.
But, on the flip side, if he were only God, simply masquerading in a meat suit, he couldn't legitimately represent humanity.
You can't pay a human penalty. You can't act as a substitute for the human race if you don't actually belong to the human race.
He had to be both simultaneously, fully God, possessing the infinite wave nature to offer a payment of infinite value, and fully man, possessing the finite particle nature to legitimately pay it on our behalf.
The paradox wasn't a theological accident or just some arbitrary rule. It was the only mathematical solution to the equation of reconciliation.
Wow.
The wave and the particle must exist simultaneously for the physical universe to function. The divinity and the humanity must exist simultaneously for salvation to occur.
And to perfectly encapsulate everything we've unpacked today, from the mind-bending math of the photon to the incomprehensible nature of God to the desperate need for a mediator, the author ends the chapter by sharing an incredibly powerful, intimate personal story.
It is a masterclass in explaining the concept of condescension.
And just to clarify, not condescension in the modern arrogant sense of talking down to someone.
No, in the classical sense. A being of high estate voluntarily lowering themselves to the level of someone of low estate, purely out of love.
The setting of the story is incredibly ordinary, which really grounds all these massive theological concepts we've been discussing in a reality we can all touch.
So the author, Ozair da Silva Mota, is sitting in his makeshift home office on a sunny afternoon.
Okay, picturing it.
He has large glass windows looking out into his yard. Suddenly, he hears a sharp, violent thud.
Oh no.
A small bird, completely disoriented by the reflection of the open sky in the glass, has crashed hard into the window at full speed. It falls, stunned, concussed, and severely injured onto the concrete sidewalk below.
And introducing an immediate element of life or death urgency, the author's dog, Moo, is nearby in the yard.
Right. And Moo, driven by millennia of predatory instinct, locks onto the injured bird and is ready to strike.
So the author sees this unfolding, jumps up from his desk, and rushes out the door to save the bird. He approaches the injured creature, extending his hands, and his intentions are entirely pure.
Total cure.
He's moving purely out of compassion. He wants to scoop the bird up, protect it from the dog's jaws, bring it inside to heal, and ultimately save its life.
But we have to shift our perspective and look at this from the bird's point of view.
The chasm of natures.
Exactly. The bird is concussed in agonizing pain, and suddenly this absolute titan, this massive, towering alien entity, is reaching down toward it.
The bird does not see a savior.
It sees an apex predator. It panics. It thrashes violently on the concrete, terrified of the author's hands.
It views the gesture of pure love and salvation as a lethal, terrifying threat.
Ultimately, fueled by adrenaline and sheer terror, the bird drags its broken body away into the bushes, desperately hiding from the very person who is trying to save it.
When we analyze the dynamic of that interaction, we see the tragic reality of a chasm between natures. The bird is fundamentally incapable of understanding the author.
It doesn't speak human language.
Right, it cannot comprehend the abstract, high-level concept of benevolent medical intentions. All its tiny brain registers is a massive disparity in scale and power, which immediately translates to existential terror.
The chasm of nature between the human and the bird completely prevents the salvation from taking place.
And here is where the author draws the most profound parallel of the entire text. This incident with the bird is the exact dynamic between finite humanity and the infinite, Almighty God.
If the creator of the universe approached finite, broken humanity in his raw, absolute, unshielded glory and power, even if his intentions were purely to heal and save, humanity would recoil in absolute existential terror.
We would be hyper-conscious of our own brokenness, our own smallness, our own guilt. We would thrash and run away, terrified by the sheer blinding scale of his holiness.
We wouldn't be able to comprehend the love because we would be blinded by the majesty.
So, the author poses a thought experiment based on the bird. What would be the only logical, functional solution for him to successfully save that injured bird without terrifying it to death?
The only way to bypass the terror is to cross the chasm of nature. The author would have to literally become a bird.
And not just any bird. He would have to become a bird of that exact same species. He would have to take on their form, speak their specific language, and approach the injured bird on its own level, offering comfort without triggering its instinctual dread of massive predators.
But here is the critical limitation of the analogy that highlights the genius of the hypostatic union. Could just any other ordinary bird have saved the injured one?
No. Another ordinary bird might be able to hop over and sit next to it in the bushes, offering some basic emotional companionship while it died.
Right. But another bird wouldn't possess the medical knowledge to diagnose and treat a severe concussion. It wouldn't have the panoramic elevated vision to understand the looming threat of the dog.
And it certainly wouldn't possess the sheer physical power required to pick the injured bird up, protect it from the predator, heal its trauma, and place it safely back in a high tree.
The savior had to be what the ancient texts call the Emmanuel, which translates to God with us.
He had to become the bird to get close enough to administer the cure without causing terror.
That is the human nature, the particle.
But he simultaneously had to retain the divine nature, the ways, the infinite medical knowledge, the panoramic vision of eternity, and the absolute power over life and death necessary to actually execute the salvation and defeat the predator of death.
He had to have one foot in the dust of the earth to reach us and one hand on the throne of heaven to save us.
It is a stunning, beautifully constructed theological argument. It takes the cold, hard reality of a bird hitting a window and elevates it into a cosmic explanation of the Incarnation.
God condescending, wrapping his infinite wave nature in a fragile particle of flesh purely out of love so that the broken creatures wouldn't run away from the cure.
What an incredible intellectual journey this text has taken us on. Let's synthesize the ground we've covered in this deep dive.
It's a lot to process.
It is. We started with the rigorous, unyielding equations of quantum physics. We saw how the empirical data of the universe practically demands that we accept the paradoxical wave-particle duality of light, proven by Planck's constant and Einstein's brilliance.
And then we watched the author expertly overlay that exact scientific framework onto theology, demonstrating how the historical scriptural clues and the sheer logical, mechanical necessity of a mediator demand that we accept the hypostatic union of Christ.
The math of the photon and the grace of the Savior operating on the exact same beautiful, paradoxical logic.
It is a symmetry that is deeply satisfying to the intellect, because it respects the math and the text, but it is also profoundly moving to the human experience. It tells us that the universe is far more mysterious and the divine is far more intimately connected to our suffering than we often dare to imagine.
Take a moment right now. Look up at the light illuminating the room you are sitting in at this exact moment, whether it's sunlight streaming through a window or an LED bulb overhead.
That light interacting with your eyes right now is behaving in ways that completely defy simple human logic.
It is constantly balancing two utterly impossible, contradictory realities at the exact same time. It is a continuous wave and it is an indivisible particle. It is a daily, physical, tangible reminder of the profound theological concept we've explored today.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We spend so much of our time and energy trying to force the universe and the people in it into single, neat, easily digestible categories.
We really do.
We demand that things be wave or particle. We label people as good or bad, successes or failures. But if the fundamental physical light of the universe, and according to the text, the creator of that universe, both operate so beautifully, powerfully, and necessarily within paradoxes, what paradoxes within your own life or within the complex people around you are you failing to appreciate simply because you're demanding they only be one thing?
That is a question that will stick with me for a long time. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep looking for those hidden connections, keep asking the hard questions, and as always, stay curious.